Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Oh, Captain, my captain.
I'm telling you straight, it's my way or the highway.
Oh, command me, Lord. Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Tell me something, my friend. You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound of it.
I'll have what she's having.
You have chosen wisely.
It reminds us of all that once was good. And it could be again.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious...
You're listening to the 30-something movie podcast. Classic movies, 30 years in the making. Welcome once again to the 30-something movie podcast. We are back again, this time for Dead Poets Society. We are moving right along in 1989. Dead Poets Society this time around. And I've got a couple of new movie news things real quick that we want to get into. And I've got two of the co-hosts are here with me tonight. So very, very quickly before I introduce these fine gentlemen here, we do spoil the movies that we talk about. So we are going to spoil Dead Poets Society. I think we're going to talk a little bit about the Rise of Skywalker trailer that came out a few days ago. So we are going to spoil as much as you can spoil a teaser trailer. We may do that. And also Dead Poets Society. So if you are not ready to hear some of those things, then you may want to wait, go and see the movie, and then come back later. If you haven't left us a review on iTunes, please feel free to go over and do that real quick. It's really, really helpful to us. It's probably the best way to help out the show, short of anybody donating financially through something like a Patreon or something like that. So that would be a great way to help out too. If you want to find out more about the show, go to 30podcast.com, and that's our website that's got all of our past episodes, all the different ways that you can get in touch with us. You can also find us on all the different social medias, Facebook, Twitter. We do, we interact quite a bit on Twitter, but also we've got an account on Letterboxd. So if you want to see some of the lists that we've created on Letterboxd, or if you want to see a nice kind of visual way to browse all the movies we've done up to this point and find those episodes, you can do that through Letterboxd. We are 30 podcasts on all of those different services. So with me tonight, I have Love Fest. Love Fest, how you doing?
I'm hanging in there. How are you?
Good. For those not in the know from a few episodes ago, Love Fest is Bo Warmbold.
Woohoo.
But we changed his name I don't remember why, but
I don't either.
I don't think we need to know why.
Nope.
I think it's just leave it at that. There it is. And then we've also got Pat Canigallo.
Hey, sorry I interrupted that in your little intro, but I just have to say, when you said we were going to talk about the Rise of Skywalker, I had goosebumps. Every hair on my body stood up. I got so excited when all you said was the Rise of Skywalker.
And you have a lot of hair.
I got a lot of hair, and it was
it
was like when they say Aslan is on the move, and they all get excited and they don't know why.
Or like when someone says Mufasa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, say it again.
Ooh. Which, by the way, that's about to come out.
It is, yeah. Isn't that like a month or two away?
Yeah, I'm kind of excited.
If even, yeah.
After the treatment the Jungle Book got, I'm real excited to see what they're going to do with The Lion King.
I still have not seen the Jungle Book one.
Oh, super good.
Okay.
I'm
gonna check it out.
When I first saw it, I had some problems with some of the changes they made, but I think in the end, it was well done.
Very quickly, before we get going too much further into the episode, I was going to mention very fast that I was checking our podcast we host through Podbean, and they give me some, just kind of some analytics and statistics on, who's listening and where they're from and all that kind of stuff. And I was just going to mention that we had for a stretch of time lately, we have had a large uptick in listeners. So we had over a 14-day period, and we don't have a ton of listeners. So thank you so much to everyone who does come out and listen to the show. We don't have a ton of listeners. Hi, Mom. But it does steady stream of folks. And over the last 2 weeks, we had something like, I want to say like a couple thousand a week.
Wow.
And I was like, say what?
Does it like get as deep into like are people going back and watching old things, listening to old episodes? Like,
yeah, actually, I was looking around at some of the different ones that people have been pulling up lately, and in the last month, our top 10 episodes have been the UHF episode, the My Left Foot episode, the Glory episode, the Captain Marvel, War of the Roses, Turner and Hooch. But then get past that, and like the last of the top 10 were RoboCop, The Lost Boys, Die Hard, and Fatal Attraction.
Wow.
So we're kind of all over the place. I know Jeff is going to be disappointed. There for a while, his was the most listened to episode. So I don't know if it still is, but I'm sure it's still up there somewhere. But yeah, we got most of our listeners come from the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and India.
Oh, okay.
And New Zealand. Well, New Zealand's in there too. So
Right.
yeah. So I don't know. That was pretty cool.
On the subcontinent is what you're saying.
We are, yeah.
Interesting.
So I was pretty surprised to see that. We're actually coming up on all time. I know we've been doing this for a few years now, but and like I said, our listener base is not quite as big as some of the other podcasts, especially if you're Australian, because for some reason, apparently, if you're an Australian podcaster, you automatically have 50 million listeners. But our show, we are actually coming up on 20,000 listeners, 20,000 downloads all time. So
really,
for a little bit mighty show like ours, I'm pretty happy about that.
Well,
yeah,
that's awesome. And
so,
John, again, cool. kudos to you for having the vision.
Oh, hey, that's my vision is here with the rest of you guys.
Awesome.
So yeah, so that was pretty cool. All right, so we got some stuff to talk about. We've got some dead poets to talk about. We've got some dead emperors. I mean, whoa! Did I do that?
Somebody's coming.
Oh man, I said that already, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, we probably just need to get into that right now then. Okay, so very, very quickly, and I'm probably not going to. I'm going to try not to talk so much.
Before you get into the plot,
yeah,
quote unquote, of this teaser, can I just nerd out for a minute and maybe Dennis will chime in on this on the love line after the fact? But
it's what I'd love you to do. Go for it.
You go to watch the Star Wars Rise of Skywalker teaser trailer on YouTube,
which I have 30 sometimes now.
This is the power of Disney. I feel like they have talked YouTube into a special window for this video.
Yes, they have.
It is ultra widescreen cinema format. I have struggled, and I have been trying to find another trailer that is using that ultra wide cinema window.
Wow.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've noticed that even just the look is different.
Super weird.
Yeah.
Like every time I think I found one that does it, I click on it and I'm like, nah, sure enough, it is formatted differently. They have just spent the time and the effort and convinced Google and YouTube that this is worth it. It's crazy.
Well, it's the last Star Wars movie for a while.
I wonder if it has anything to do with YouTube's push into renting movies. I wonder if they're experimenting with
might be
a cinema window, but very interesting.
Yeah.
Just had to nerd out about that for a second. Now I'll let you talk about plot and things.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've passed on all we know. 1,000 generations live in you now. But this is your fight.
Well, and I don't, like I said, I don't want to talk too much because I just recorded an entire episode on this by myself, and I just posted that up before we started recording. So, so it'll be out there for anybody who wants to go listen to it. But the thing I will say is it was a lot of fun being at Celebration, at Star Wars Celebration this last weekend, and getting to be in the panel. As I mentioned in the recording I did, I wasn't in the actual room where the actors and the director were, but I was in one of the overflow viewing rooms. Still, you had to win a lottery to get one of those seats. So, you know, it was just fun to be there with a bunch of the other fans and, you know, people screaming all around you as soon as this thing came on. And it was just a lot of fun to be with a whole bunch of other people that were excited to be there. So, Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. You see the trailer for the first time. What's your initial reaction? And keep in mind, we are a family-friendly show.
Mild disappointment that they felt they had to go back to the Emperor well.
Okay.
But then I also realized that for all the people who complained that they killed off, that they backed away from canon when Disney bought into Lucasfilm, the Emperor coming back always was canon.
Right.
So I had to step back for a second and say, okay, it feels like a cheap stunt, but it's not really. It was always there.
Right.
So I'm coming back around on it, but I'm a little disappointed. I also feel like there's a lot of hinting at some inter-trilogy retconning that bothers me.
Okay.
I feel like there was some disappointment coming out of Episode 8 that they're trying to rectify, and I'm worried that's going to be clunky.
Okay.
But this is coming from a guy who tries to avoid trailers because,
mm-hmm.
well, that's just how I am.
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
Okay. All right. Patronus?
Okay, so my initial reaction was I really dug that it started with the heavy breathing. I'm not trying to sound like innuendos aside. I mean, you could tell like someone is putting themselves through their paces, and I thought that was a really cool lead-in. That whole thing with the TIE fighter that was like a nod to North by Northwest was crazy awesome, and I really dig the whole Jedi not archaic, but you know, an elegant weapon from a more civilized age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Off technology. Luke versus the speeder bike. Luke versus the AT-AT Walker. Darth Vader versus an entire squad of rebel troopers. I mean, you know, it's like I just like seeing that, and that's what that first scene demonstrated. So that original immediately set the tone for, wow, this is going to be awesome. Very excited to see Lando Calrissian in there. Very cool to see Billy D. Williams.
Yeah, that is going to be cool.
And, you know, just giving this big belly laugh, and that was one of the things that I remember mentioning about Star Wars, that the original three, or not original, I'm sorry, the new trilogy, the episode 1, 2, and 3, became like dogmatically wrapped up in the whole story of the Jedi and their training and all that, which I thought was very cool. But to me, it almost sacrificed a whole element of Star Wars that was like swashbuckling space pirate smugglers kind of thing. And I thought that when they, you know, these, you know, episodes 7 and 8 kind of recaptured that a little bit, to where, you know, Han Solo and Chewbacca and, you know, great pilots flying spaceships through the galaxy, you know, like that element kind of came back. And that one scene of when all this stuff is going crazy and, oh my gosh, this is going to be scary and this is awful, and boy, she's hugging Princess Leia and 1,000 years is down the tubes, but you shall rise, but you have a fight. Just to see Lando and Chewie ripping across space in the Millennium Falcon and Lando giving this big belly laugh, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it's an element of Star Wars that I think is very, very cool. And I'm glad to see them kind of putting that out there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to talk fast and be brief. I mean, obviously, you guys know Millennium Falcon has excited, and that looked really cool. All the stuff with, it looks like they're on some sort of a quest, and fighting and drama. And of course, I'm like, okay, well, Carrie Fisher's in it, or Princess Leia's in it. So how are they gonna, put that element together? And then with the Emperor laughing sadistically in the background, it's that was like, I mean, that really got me. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, neither was any of the crowd I was with.
Okay. And
they went nuts.
Yeah. And it was sort of like, oh, well, this is okay. Yeah, all right. So where did that come from? Whoa, yeah, and that's the note that it ends on is very exciting. So,
yeah.
Anyways, those were just kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I don't want to talk. I'm not going to talk too much or at all about this because I've already kind of done that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to be there. It was a lot of fun to be among all the other people watching this when you had the Emperor laugh at the end of the trailer. And then as the lights come up, Ian McDiarmid, the actor who plays the Emperor, is on the stage and he picks up the microphone and says, "Roll it again." And then they show the trailer one more time. It was a lot of fun. Like it was really fun to be there. The rest of my time at Star Wars Celebration, I learned that Star Wars Celebration is not necessarily something you go to just for one day, because if you want to do things, you have to wait in line for many hours. So there were several things I did not get to do, but the other thing that I did get to do was I went to another panel where a guy who works for the music department for both Lucasfilm and LucasArts when they were around making video games. He's done a lot of composing or music work on some of the movies, TV shows, video games, and he's done some voice work in some of the movies, like pickup stuff for random, like stormtrooper voices, things like that. He used to do a show with one of the bigger Star Wars podcasts called Rebel Force Radio. They used to do a show called Star Wars Oxygen, where they would go through, I think I've talked about it before on here. They would go through and they would take each of the movies and they'd take about 3 episodes. So they'd spend, a good, maybe like 3 hours, 3.5 hours, just analyzing and picking apart the music of each of the movies and really just talking about the influences of where those pieces came from and all that stuff. And they went through the entire trilogy, and they even did, I don't remember if they ever did episode 8, but they went through and they did all the way up to Rogue One. And then that show kind of disappeared. And I thought, oh, well, maybe they're not doing much with it right now. Maybe they just got too busy. Well, he was doing a panel at Star Wars Celebration where he was kind of picking apart the music of The Phantom Menace. And he had a keyboard up on stage. He was playing through some of the different songs and showing where the influences were from and how, this piece of music ends up, if you listen to these few notes, this ends up becoming the Imperial March one day and all this different stuff. Come to find out, he's got a new podcast called The Soundtrack Show. And I've started listening to it. It's really, really good. Like his first several episodes, he just talks about music and movie music in general, just to kind of get, especially for somebody like me, to get a non-musician kind of up to speed with some of the terminology he's going to use and just some of the concepts. And then the first movie he really ends up covering is Jaws. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in the middle of episode 2 of a 3-episode series that he's doing on the music of Jaws. And I don't know where he finds the time to do a full-time job and then to do all the research on this music and where it came from and things from John Williams' personal life that would have influenced his writing at the time. And he clearly has a lot of knowledge in his head that he is able to pull out for these different movies and soundtracks. And I guess some of his other shows, he does Back to the Future and just a whole bunch of different, he's expanded beyond Star Wars to go through different soundtracks. So I've subscribed to the podcast. I've been listening to it. It's been a lot of fun, but it was fun to kind of get to see him in person, go through that kind of analysis of some of the music pieces.
What was your most surprising thing in what you've heard so far and what he talked about? What was the most surprising thing that you felt like, boy, I never knew that, or wow, that's interesting about them? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the one that I really liked how he kind of went through the history of how the Duel of the Fates music came about. He showed the Anakin's theme from episode 1. So little kid Anakin, how his theme, when you listen to it, he said, when you listen to it, it really is not very memorable. Like Anakin's theme is not one that people go, oh yeah, I can hum that. But if you listen to it, it really has bits and pieces of nearly all of the major Star Wars themes in it. Throughout the song. He said if there's any song that's like the DNA of Star Wars music, it would be Anakin's theme from episode 1. The one that was really cool, and Pat, I know I was telling you about this the other day, was the one at the end of episode 1 with the children singing the Augie's Great Municipal Band. That one I thought was really cool, and I remember hearing this before, but I'd kind of forgotten about it. When you have the children doing the kind of the chanting or the choir singing at the end of that song, and it's very triumphant and it's very happy and celebratory. And he pointed out, he's like, well, if you just change these notes ever so slightly and slow them down and lower them in pitch, you have the men's choir from the Emperor's theme. And it's much darker and scarier, but it's really almost the same music. And I'm like, that makes the end of episode 1 really creepy, but also very awesome. Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. So sometimes we come on here and we recommend other podcasts. I would recommend that one right now, the Soundtrack Show. If anybody's looking for a podcast to listen to and you're a fan of movie music or just movies and music in general, go check out that one. It's David W. Collins is the host of that one. And so far, I'm only a few episodes in, but it's one that I'm going to be listening to every time a new episode comes out. But yeah, the Star Wars Celebration was a lot of fun to see people in costumes. They had some different replicas of some of the ships, like full-size stuff. It was funny. A lot of people, just random people, were kind of waiting in line to get their picture taken next to a full-size X-Wing. But when I walked over to the TIE Fighter, it was all people who were dressed up as Imperial pilots. Like that was like 90% of the line was people dressed as Imperial pilots. So I don't know if they were trying to get in a big group photo or something, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I did a little bit of minimal dressing up because I wanted to be comfortable, but I needed to have a costume on too. So I had my green lightsaber with me, and I just went as the full black Return of the Jedi Luke.
Nice.
So I had an opportunity. There was a photo op area where you could sit on a speeder bike. So I sat on a speeder bike, had my green lightsaber, and I got my picture taken with that. So I do have proof I was there. Normally when I go by myself, I don't have proof that I was actually there, but there is proof that I will fit on a speeder bike.
There you go, man.
Now, not a moving speeder bike, let's say that. Because I guarantee I would fall off, because I'm not, unlike you, Pat, I don't think I would do too well on a motorcycle. So speeder bike, like 10 times worse.
Well, you know what I say to that, John? I think motorcycles would be good for anybody to ride. So, we'll leave it at that.
Okay, that's fine. I'm not saying I'm anti-motorcycle. I'm just saying I know I would fall off. Balance is not, we may be bringing balance to the Force. Balance is not one of my strong suits.
Got it.
Anakin would have a hard time bringing balance to the John. Let's put it that way. And see what I just said there, that could be something totally different.
That statement has been
that really backfired. Yeah.
And hearing about the backfire just makes it that much better.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I'm going to stop talking now. It's going to be tough for the rest of an audio podcast when I stop talking, but I'm going to stop talking now. All right. The only other thing that I wanted to say is that as of this year, and I forgot to look up the exact date for this other one, but one of the things they were kind of making a big deal out of, and when I realized it, I was like, yes, it is is that this year is the 20th anniversary of The Phantom Menace.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
So just like thinking that is 20 years old. And then I saw an article earlier today that, and of course, because it came out the same year, The Matrix is also 20 years old.
Oh.
Yikes.
Yeah. So just think, we've only got 10 more years until we do The Phantom Menace and The Matrix.
I can't wait. And I'm just going to say again, because spring break, I surprised myself. I rewatched that trilogy, not twice. I rewatched that trilogy 3 times over spring break. Like, I'm dang, oof, 20 years old?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I will say I did buy a couple of items when I was at Star Wars Celebration. I got a Clone Trooper action figure for John. I got a little Porg purse for Nora because Porgs are her favorite thing. Mm-hmm. And let's see. For Sharon, she and I have matching pins now, so she can wear one and I can wear one. And one of them says "I love you," and the other one says "I know." And then I got a T-shirt, and one of my favorite things I got, which I'm not drinking out of right now because I think it's in the dishwasher, is a pint glass that says Guinness on the front, but then it has a picture of Alec Guinness on top of it.
Outstanding.
So I'm a fan of that one. All right. Well, I don't think I have any other new movie news or anything else. If you guys saw anything else that you want to talk about, we can do that for a minute. Otherwise, we can start to jump on in. We'll do our This Week in 89, but we can start to jump on into Dead Poets Society if you guys are ready.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Okay. Very quickly, I will say this actually came out, let's see, it was early in March. But since our recording schedule has been a little crazy lately, we're just now mentioning it. So thank you to the guys that left it. We did have a new iTunes review, a 5-star review left by a reviewer named Derelict88. And it was left kind of back in early March. And they said, 30-something celebrates all things cinema 30 years later retrospective. It's a clever idea that ages with the show. The hosts are engaging and insightful, and their passion for movies comes through. Listen and give them a subscription. Thank you very much, Derelict88.
Yeah, right on.
Wow, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. This week in 89. So we're looking at the week of April 17th to about April 23rd. On April 19th, we have the Central Park jogger incident. A woman was assaulted in Central Park, and it's regarded as one of the most widely publicized crimes of the 1980s. On April 21st, George W. Bush becomes a co-CEO of the Texas Rangers. On April 23rd, UCLA quarterback Troy Aikman is picked up by the Cowboys in the NFL draft.
Who cares?
You may leave the show now, sir.
Oh, careful.
Mm-hmm.
Careful.
Mm-hmm.
I care.
The top book is still The Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. The top movie was Major League, and the top song is She Drives Me Crazy by the Fine Young Cannibals.
Fine Young Cannibals. Oh, wow. That's a name I have not heard.
She drives me crazy.
In a long time. A long time. All right. Well, our movie this time is Dead Poets Society. It came out on the 9th of June, 1989, rated PG, with a runtime of 2 hours and 8 minutes, directed by Peter Weir, who also did The Truman Show and Master and Commander. Producers for this one are Stephen Haft, Paul Junger-Witt, who died in 2018, and Tony Thomas. Haft did Hocus Pocus, Witt did Golden Girls, and Thomas did Insomnia. Writers are Tom Schulman, who did Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and What About Bob. Cinematography was John Seal. He did Mad Max Fury Road and Witness. Music was by Maurice Jarre, who died in 2009, did the music for Ghost, Lawrence of Arabia, and Dr. Zhivago. The budget was $16.4 million. The box office was $235.9 million, so it didn't do too bad. Rotten Tomatoes critics gives it an 84%. Rotten Tomatoes audience a 92%. IMDb is an 81%. Letterboxd is an 80%. And CinemaScore is an A+. Robin Williams played John Keating. He was in Good Morning Vietnam and Mrs. Doubtfire. Robert Sean Leonard played Neil Perry. He was in House and The Age of Innocence. Ethan Hawke played Todd Anderson. He was in Training Day and the movie series Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. Josh Charles played Knox Overstreet. He was in the TV series The Good Wife and the series The Sports Night. Gail Hansen played Charlie Dalton. He was in a TV series called Class of 96. Dylan Cussman played Richard Cameron. He was in Jack Reacher and Leatherheads. Leilon Ruggiero played Stephen Meeks. I probably got that name wrong, but we were going to go with it. Played Stephen Meeks. He was in the movie Fallen and The Greenskeeper. James Waterston played Gerard Pitts. He was in Law & Order SVU and 6 Feet Under. Norman Lloyd played Mr. Nolan. He was in The Age of Innocence and Spellbound. And Kurtwood Smith played Mr. Perry. He was in RoboCop and That 70s Show, and also in Star Trek VI. That's it for all my actor information. So we're going to give you the trailer, and we'll be back here in just a moment.
Gentlemen, what are the 4 pillars?
Tradition, honor, discipline, excellence. Banners up.
Welton Academy for Boys, a breeding ground for the future leaders of America. An institution dedicated to achievement, virtue, and conformity. A school whose rigid standards are upheld by every single teacher, except one.
Come on, Mr. Overstreet, you twerp. Mr. Anderson, are you a man or an amoeba? Language was developed for one endeavor, and that is to communicate. No, to woo women.
Mr. Keating.
Some people like to rock, some people like to roll, but moving and a grooving's gonna satisfy my soul. Let's have a party.
Touchstone Pictures presents Robin Williams as John Keating, teacher.
Well, is this a dagger I see before me?
Philosopher.
I like Byron. I give him a 42, but I can't dance to him.
Orator.
Oh, Titus, bring your friend hither.
And founder of the Dead Poets Society.
A bunch of guys sitting around reading poetry.
No. Ding. Thank you for playing anyway.
What was the Dead Poets Society? The Dead Poets were dedicated to sucking the marrow out of life. Spirits soared, women swooned, and gods were created. Not a bad way to spend an evening, eh?
I hereby reconvene the Dead Poets Society.
To strive, to seek, to find.
Gotta do more, gotta be more!
Dare to walk a new path, dare to strike out and find new ground.
I'm hearing rumors, John, about some unorthodox teaching methods in your classroom.
Break out.
I'm gonna do it!
John Keating. He began by teaching English. Now, he's changing lives.
I got the part!
Tear out the entire introduction.
Who put you up to it? Was it this new man, this, Mr. Keating?
Are we just playing around out here, or do we mean what we say?
Tradition, honor, discipline.
Rip, shred, tear.
What is this Dead Poet Society? I want names.
This is a battle, a war. The casualties could be your hearts and souls.
For the first time in my whole life, I know what I want to do. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits. Poetry, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for.
That's beautiful.
Sit down, Mr. Anderson.
Carpe Diem!
Sit down. What the hell is going on here?
Seize the day.
Touchstone Pictures presents Robin Williams as John Keating. He was the inspiration that made their lives extraordinary. Dead Poets Society.
Who was he in Star Trek VI?
He played the Federation president.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And I did not realize that. I don't think I knew that until I looked this stuff up.
I'm going to go back and watch Star Trek VI tonight.
I know. You know what you should probably do is you probably just start from the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Watch all the Star Treks tonight?
Yeah, just start from the beginning.
I fell into the original series rabbit hole. I'm just saying.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We have been watching Discovery, and we kind of like it.
Cool.
So
It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Dead Poet Society. I will start our discussion off by saying I have nothing but good things to say about this movie. This movie is probably one of the reasons I wanted to become a teacher.
Oh, wow. Right on.
So, I mean, Robin Williams is always really, I've always been a big fan of Robin Williams. I've watched his stuff since I was a kid with Mork and Mindy and, a lot of his different movies, Popeye when he was Popeye. And even at a younger age, I remember seeing Good Morning Vietnam, probably when I shouldn't have seen it, or at least heard the soundtrack over and over again. Mrs. Doubtfire, like a lot of that stuff. But always kind of growing up, I just remember him being one of my favorite comedians and favorite actors. So watching this one, I think this is probably the first time I remember seeing him in a serious role, even though he still had that kind of quirky creativity to his character, to John Keating, but it was not like the crazy manic Robin Williams that you normally see in his other roles, not like Mork and Mindy kind of stuff. But yeah, so this, this movie in particular is probably because, ultimately when I became a teacher, I became an English teacher, and I would hazard a guess and say that this movie is probably one of the major reasons that I decided to become a teacher.
Cool.
So I really, really like this movie.
I don't ever want to speak for someone, and it's so unfortunate that Jeff can't make it here tonight. That's sort of like Dennis missing out on the Field of Dreams podcast with Jeff. I know that Jeff echoed your sentiments. And it was very influential in him becoming a teacher as well.
Yeah.
I have a hunch it steered a lot of people in that direction. It shows the life-changing effects that a teacher can have.
Do you remember the first time you saw this movie?
Oh, wow. It's funny you asked that. I know it wasn't in the theater. I know it was at home. I think the first time I saw it all the way through, I was older than I think I was.
Okay.
Because there are definitely parts of it that I don't remember as well as others. Like some of the beginning. I feel like I've seen it on cable so much that I would just find it.
Yeah.
So much of the beginning is sort of, oh yeah, I remember this now. But I definitely saw it a long time ago, and I've seen it a bunch since. It's a fantastic film.
Yeah, this is one of the first ones after I heard Robin Williams had died. This and Good Morning Vietnam were the first two movies I wanted to watch as soon as I had heard that.
I'd say that's a good top two right there.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Pat, what about you? Do you remember the first time you saw this one?
So this one is interesting for me because I have only seen it a handful of times, and I saw it much later in the game. Now, the question as to why, I think coming up, I think I got this movie confused with something else because, and I don't know how or why, but I just remember hearing about it, and then I remember when I first saw it, someone said, oh yeah, it's the one about the teacher. And it was like, oh, it's about a teacher? Oh yeah, it's great. It's about a teacher and blah, 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 blah. And I saw it, and I think I was in college when I finally saw it. And I remember just being blown away. But it was like, from when I remember hearing about it as a kid, all the way up to when I finally saw it in college, I kind of thought it was something completely different. And what it was, I can't tell you. I don't know if it was, I'm pretty sure my parents saw it, and folks maybe came back and said, oh my God, it was a great movie, but maybe they kind of talked, maybe what I keyed in on was when they just said, yeah, there's some really sad parts and some parts that are hard to watch. And maybe in their kind of hearing them talk about it, that's what I fixated on. So, yeah. So I know that doesn't make much sense, but I wish I could tell you, oh yeah, I got this movie confused with this other movie. But it was just like, when I finally saw it, I kind of was always avoiding it because it was like, I don't know if I want to see this. This is going to be kind of some heavy-duty kind of stuff. And then when I finally saw it, I'm like, well, it is a heavy movie, but it's great. It's fantastic. So I am pretty sure I saw this in college, maybe even after, when I finally sat down and saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, but I don't remember why, but it was just kind of a mistaken identity thing for me.
Yeah. Originally, I mean, for me, Robin Williams is just such a big part of this movie, and originally, I think that when they were kind of starting to put this together, there were a couple of different people. I was reading this earlier on IMDb, but there were a couple of different people that were originally meant to be in that teacher role, in that John Keating role. The original apparently was Dustin Hoffman. Okay, that's interesting. That would have made it a different movie.
See that though?
Yeah. Oh, I could see it. Yeah,
that would have been kind of cool. This was better, but that would have been cool.
Right. So Dustin Hoffman, and then originally, when there was a different director attached to the movie, Liam Neeson.
Oh, interesting.
was going
now,
to be in the
that
part.
one I'm not sure I buy, but I think a lot of that has
Mhm.
to do with the roles Liam Neeson's had of late.
Yeah.
I think back then he had a little less, you've kidnapped my daughter, a little more dramatic role.
Right. It's not so much when the kid talks back to him in class, he's not going to stand up from his desk and say, I will find you. I have a very particular set of skills. One of them is grading. The other one is cutting your throat. Now sit down and show me your barbaric yelp. Yeah. Carpe Diem. Seize the, I don't know what the Latin is for throat. Like seize the throat. Maybe we could have changed it to that. I mean, that would be more of a modern Liam Neeson, but yeah. I get your point. Yeah, no. So that for me, when I saw those, I was like, yeah, I mean, those, they sound interesting, especially the Dustin Hoffman one. I could see that, but I'm just like, I can't separate this movie from Robin Williams. Like, to me, this is just so much his movie that I really cannot. I have a hard time picturing anybody else in that role.
Well, he really pulls down the like unappreciated underdog, anti-establishment. I mean, you look at what he does in Good Morning Vietnam, and you look at what he does in this. He really personifies that kind of the one seeing it from the perspective of the under. Yeah, listen, maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's just his looks, the way he delivers his lines, the way he brings that character to life. It really, he's good at that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there are a couple things about this movie. Just the whole, just that whole atmosphere of this, this type of school and what they're training these boys to grow up and be, and the kind of stifling of any kind of creativity or thinking outside the box or that kind of stuff. Not that any of the schools I went to were like that, but I think I had a little bit of a connection to this anyway, because living in England, I went to an all boys school for a few years. So already kind of had that sense of, I was seeing something that looked familiar to me. And then I feel like I had, not necessarily as my English teacher, but I had a couple of teachers in my school in England that maybe more than the school wanted them to. They kind of encouraged a little bit more free thinking and a little bit more outside the box kind of stuff. And they were the teachers everybody loved. Mm-hmm. And I know that I was reading somewhere that Robin Williams said that he really enjoyed doing this movie, and he kind of based the character of John Keating on the teachers he wished he had. I don't believe he ever said that. I don't believe he ever said he had a teacher like this, but he kind of took all the things that he wished he had in a teacher, or maybe some of the little positive bits and pieces that he had from teachers over the years, and that's what this character became. But yeah, I think one of the things that I really liked about this one was, like I said earlier, one of the first times I had seen him in a serious role, like where it's not the manic Robin Williams that we're kind of used to from a lot of his earlier stuff and a lot of his stuff in the 80s. But this is more, kind of this and Good Morning Vietnam, where him, maybe for lack of a better term, calming down and trying to, expand his horizons by doing some more serious dramatic stuff. Yeah, I was going to ask, do you guys have, in terms of, as the movie goes on, I was going to ask about like favorite scene or something like that, but just a real quick kind of recap of what the story is, as we start with, for anybody who might not have seen it or doesn't remember most of it, we start with the boys coming in for a new school year, and we have a very shy student. Todd Anderson is starting his senior year at Welton Academy, and he is brand new. And so he is assigned Neil Perry as his roommate, and kind of gets in with this group of boys, but he's fairly shy, so it's kind of taking him a while to get acclimated here. And you can see right away this is a very kind of stodgy, very New England prep school, and obviously the teachers and the headmaster are not about to teach the students to do a whole lot of free thinking or a whole lot of creative type work, anything like that. And they quickly run into the new English teacher, who is John Keating, and he is very much, very, very much kind of free thinking and you don't do things the traditional way. I had been going back a little while ago. I'd been going back and rewatching some of the old episodes of The Office. And I remembered one of the episodes had a scene where Michael Scott goes to business school and he's giving a presentation at a business school. Mm-hmm. And he tells one of the students, he's, let me see your textbook. And he starts ripping pages out of the textbook because he's trying to do the whole John Keating thing from Dead Poets Society. Mm-hmm. He's like, you will not learn business from this book. And he's just tearing pages out. Now, I know that was expensive, but it'll be okay. But so we get, as the movie goes on, just kind of as a real quick recap, we get the boys start up a club called the Dead Poets Society, which they find out that Keating was a member when he was a student at Welton, or Helton, as the boys call it. And they kind of start this club, and this is kind of their way of rebelling a little bit against the authority of the school. And then as you get a little bit further on, you get the sense that one of the main boys, Neil Perry, he does not want to follow, his father's plan for him. He wants to act. He wants to, his dad wants him to be, I think, a doctor, wants him to go to an Ivy League school to become a doctor. And instead, he really just wants to act on stage. And he does get the role of Puck in kind of a community theater type production of Midsummer Night's Dream. And I think his father, just the overbearingness of his father, played by Kurtwood Smith, who's just, if you ever want an overbearing father, that's a great actor to have him play it. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, and sadly, Neil ends up committing suicide because his dad basically says he's going to take him out of school and roll him into a military academy. And he can't stand up to his father. So instead he decides to take his own life. And that's when everything kind of falls apart in the movie, that some of the other boys blame their English teacher for Neil's death. And so they rat on everybody else and the whole thing falls apart. And obviously at the end, Keating then is fired and ends up having to leave the school. And you kind of end with something that had been a piece or a quote that they had talked about earlier in the movie, where Todd, the very shy boy, ends up standing on his desk and salutes Keating and says, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." And then you have, a good portion of the class starts to do the same thing. They stand on top of their desk and say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," as he leaves. And then he says, "Thank you," and walks out the door. And that's the end of the movie. So, just there's so many great lines from this movie as he's teaching. I feel like every scene where he's teaching the boys something, there's just all kinds of stuff that you can quote from those scenes. It's kind of like when I think about him in Good Morning Vietnam. There's very few times that when he gets on the radio, there's not something that you can quote there. Mm-hmm. And I think this movie is no different. Like there's some memorable line, and I think I looked somewhere that this movie has at least 2 or 3 of the top 100 movie quotes of all time. I think I saw somewhere. Is there a scene in particular, when you think of this movie, is there a scene in particular that's most memorable to you or that you like best?
I liked when he had them marching around the courtyard and was talking to them about conformity. Mm-hmm. They all start walking together and he says, there it is, see, conformity, and we all did this. And then he says, in the line I like is he says, and all of you that think you would have done it different, why were you clapping? I just thought, oh, wow, that's a cool little, that's a cool little lesson.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I obviously the scene at the end where they're all standing on the desk is the iconic one that you picture.
Right.
I mean, I think that scene is even showed as part of a montage all the time. They just show that quick pan clip of all the kids standing on the desk. But if you exclude that because it's, too well known, there's a scene when they first get into the cave and they first form the Dead Poet Society and they're reading from those books for the first time, and you can sort of see them start to realize what this club really is. I think that's a really cool one for me.
Yeah. I like when the kid does the poem with the saxophone. I thought that was kind of cool.
I kind of figured you'd like that part.
Yeah, it was slick. I mean, in the beginning, and it's funny, and they called it. I mean, the beginning, it was just kind of he was just making obnoxious sounds, and it was just like okay. But then he kind of like fit it, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool because it was kind of. And boy, you're the literary guys, or John. I know it could maybe tell me better, but I mean, it was almost like the beginning of like beat poetry and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I know figured heavily into a little bit of that jazz kind of free jazz kind of club thing, and they were kind of representing that.
Yeah, he found a little jazz groove there on that sax, and it was cool.
Charlie renames himself Nuwanda.
Mm-hmm.
And who is Nuwanda? Is there some significance there, or that I'm just an intellectual clod and I'm not picking up on it, or?
As far as I know, no, I don't know.
Okay.
As far as I know, it's just from that movie, but
Yeah, I think it's just a. Trying to think of another movie where somebody does it, where they start going by a different name to show their rebellion, but that's I think all it really was.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so many scenes in this movie that I really enjoy every single time that Robin Williams is on screen teaching. A lot of times when the other teachers or the headmaster are, talking to him about something, and he's got these little side comments that if they're not quite paying attention, they don't realize he's kind of insulted them a little bit. Just every time something like that happens is just is gold in this movie. I do really like the some of the different times where, like when he's having him rip the paper out of the book. That was always fun. There were times with several textbooks that I had that I wanted to do that with the kids, but I also wanted to keep my job, so I did not do that with the kids. I do like the scene when Todd and Neil are standing outside, and he's talking about the Christmas gift that his parents got him. Or no, not Christmas gift. It was his birthday.
Yeah.
It was his birthday. He said, yeah, today's my birthday. And he's like, oh, happy birthday. He's like, what'd you get? He's like, I got this desk set. He's like, isn't that the same desk set? And he's like, yeah, they gave me the same thing last year. Maybe they thought you needed another one. And then he starts to get upset, and he's like, well, they weren't thinking, they don't really, I didn't like it the first time they got it for me. I didn't. And Neil picks it up, and he's like, well, this is a really great desk set. I don't think you quite understand. I mean, who would not want a desk set as wonderful as this? And then he's like, the shape of this, it's fairly aerodynamic, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
You can feel it. This thing wants to fly. And then they throw it. He hands it to him, and he's like, here we go. The world's first unmanned flying desk set. And they throw it off the roof, and everything goes everywhere. And they're kind of like looking down at everything, and he goes, well, don't worry. You'll get another one next year.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So I have maybe a bit of a tough question before we start to move on into our 5 questions for this one. Do you think, so we'll get serious here for a second. Do you think that the John Keating character is responsible for Neil Perry's death? Because certainly the authorities, like the school authorities, Neil Perry's dad, they blame him for Neil's death, and ultimately that's one of the many reasons why he's fired. But I think we as the audience are supposed to feel a little conflicted about that. So what say you?
There
No.
is no conflict.
No?
I didn't. Until you said that, sorry, Bo. I think I cut across you there.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, I didn't really see that as in any way, shape, or form his fault. I mean, if anything, it was the dad was pushing him. I mean, even the kid going to the play. Even the kid doing the play. Now, correct me, I might be way wrong. I thought the kid decided to do the play like well before Keating's classes kind of had their influence on him. I think I remember him talking later and him saying, "You've got to talk to your father about this."
Well, I don't think even if he
wrong? Do I have that wrong?
maybe because I feel like he didn't even have the inkling of that being something that he would want to do until he was inspired by this teacher. I might be wrong. I might have to go back and rewatch that just to make sure. But
yeah, I think. Yeah. Okay. So I'd probably off with that. But again, I really think that it was just a matter of the parents wanting to not blame themselves and, blame someone else for them really screwing up with their kid. And then the school looking, the cover the butt and he was supposed to be the young and, the contrary opinions. But even that, and I'm kind of rambling here, but even that, it wasn't like, sure, he tore the front page out of the book, but it wasn't even like he had real, it wasn't even like he was really, at least in my mind, challenging convention. It's just that he was teaching in a more energetic, make it come alive. Don't see these people as, dead poets and just words on a page, but see the emotion behind it. Get back to what this get back to what this poetry was all about and what these words were really saying. But it wasn't like he, was turning around and saying, don't read Shakespeare, read this other. Do you get what I'm saying? So, all he was doing was just, it wasn't like he was challenging convention in that everything was being taught in a very stodgy, dogmatic manner. He was getting to know the kids and, working with them and getting them to see the passion and have passion for what they do. Basically, what in today's day and age we would call good teaching practice.
Right.
I don't think he did, but John made some good points about the influence that he exerted. I just think that showing someone another door is never a reason that they're going to kill themselves. So that's why I think he's not responsible.
Even if you knew, now I agree with you. I'm just going to play devil's advocate here. Even if you knew that the person's father was the way that he was and was that domineering, would you still push?
It's an interesting one.
That's my only thought, because I agree with you. I wouldn't hold him responsible, but knowing, if I was in a situation where I was the teacher and I knew that a particular student had a parent that was as intense as Mr. Perry in this movie,
as Red Foreman,
right? I would probably find ways to encourage their creativity, but also because I don't know that Keating really. I know there were a couple of times that Keating kind of told the boys, you better back off just a little bit, or know when to rebel and when not to rebel. But I also kind of feel like he didn't really. It was almost kind of like with a little wink and a nod. It was like, hey boys, just know when not to get caught. Okay. So in some ways, while I don't think I would hold him responsible for his death, I think that there are some ways in which he was a little reckless with his trying to get the boys to think creatively in that time and place. Now, obviously, I agree with like that. He is the kind of teacher that I always wanted and hoped that I always wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And so I agree with everything he did, but given that time period and that family situation and all that, I can see where some of the responsibility might fall onto him.
Given the time period, yes. I think I adjusted for the time period. Maybe you're right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we do have 5 questions for this movie. Now, I will say, I think I'm just going to edit this together this way. I was sitting down with Jeff to record something earlier, and so he and I already recorded his responses to his 5 questions. So I'm going to edit those in a little bit later. So we'll get to hear what Jeff's responses were. Good. So we'll have that piece of it. And I told him if he wants to call into the the love line and share a little bit more on Dead Poet Society, he can totally do that too, and we'll add in there. So the first response you hear in each of these 5 questions will be a pre-recorded response from Jeff, and then we will all go into our answers for the 5 questions. So
He asks each traveler 5 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
You've got to ask yourself one question.
What are you asking me for? I don't know.
What you've just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. And may God have mercy on your soul.
all right, 5 questions this time around. If you haven't listened to us before, our 5 questions are 5 loosely related questions to the movie that we are talking about. So we'll try to do these semi-rapid fire. We're not going to spend too much time on these, but we'll go through and we'll give each of our answers to these 5 questions. Question number 1, who was your favorite teacher growing up?
It's a tough question. I've been thinking a lot about this. When I hear growing up, I think like elementary school and middle school, that age range. My 2nd grade teacher, Miss Hochschild, was phenomenal. She was so caring and so empathetic and treated everything everything that the students were concerned about or thought about with a level of importance that really made it feel as though we were on the same level. And likewise, she had no problem telling us, like when she would say, wow, she wouldn't yell at us. She was more of a, just say, you just need to stop talking now. And people would, because we respected her so much. I think because she respected all of us. So Miss Hochschild was definitely, might be my favorite teacher from elementary through middle school. Had some other really good teachers. My kindergarten teacher, Miss Beal, who I got to sub in her class by the time I graduated with my teaching degree.
Oh, nice.
I did some sub work, and I applied to sub in that district, and lo and behold, I became her substitute a number of times.
That's cool.
That was really cool. I got to be there the year that she had her retirement party. So it was really neat.
Oh, that's cool.
The kids all made shirts. All their current kids had shirts. I was in Miss Beal's 40th kindergarten class. I did the math and I made a shirt of my own. I was in Miss Beal's 17th kindergarten class.
That's awesome.
It was really neat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think Miss Hochschild, 2nd grade, Miss Beal, kindergarten.
Okay.
A couple of high school and college professors in there as well, but there you go.
I'll say, probably one of my most recent teachers was my trumpet professor in college, and he was a mentor, and it wasn't just, learning to play the trumpet, but he was kind of the guy that really, he was also our jazz studies professor, and he was the guy that really kind of got my head on straight, really all the philosophies in teaching music and all that kind of came before, he kind of put it into, he wrapped it all up and kind of, focused it. And he was one that really was able to teach any student that was in front of him and allow them to bloom wherever they were planted. I'll put it that way.
Nice.
And he was a fantastic professor, a wonderful, wonderful human being. And, he was, my mentor, and he, I would say, my trumpet professor in college.
For me, it was probably my electronics teacher in high school, Myron
Okay.
Conkle.
Nice.
He was just the right mix of old school teacher and real person that I think just spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really learned a lot from him, some that I can't repeat because he was old school enough that you just don't say that anymore.
Right.
But, but I feel like I learned so much in that class. Just about, and not just about, voltage and wattage. Don't get me wrong. It was great.
Yeah.
How about you, John?
This one I had a really tough time with this question. because part of me wanted to answer. I had my math teacher in my school in England. He's actually the person that got me hooked on comic books. And he I think was kind of closest to the persona that, when I took on the persona of the teacher in the classroom, it was kind of, I think, modeled a little bit after him. His classroom always had like comic book superhero posters up on the wall. He'd always joke around with us in class, but when it was time to get serious, it was time to get serious. He always tried to hold us to, high standards. He joked around with us, but he also wouldn't let you get away with much. Like he held you up to, this is what I expect of you guys, and really pushed us. He always seemed kind of crazy to us too. Like he wore musical socks all the time. He just was kind of a crazy guy. And actually a little bit of the sad part is I guess he got so stressed out towards the end of the time that I was there at the school in England. He got so stressed out that he actually had these horrible back spasms, and he collapsed in class one day and he couldn't get up off the ground, and we all thought he was joking.
Oh no.
So the entire class of students is like laughing, and we didn't realize like he's actually in pain and he's hurting, and we didn't realize because we all thought it was kind of a joke, because that was just his personality to, joke like that. Mm-hmm. So it took several minutes, and then we all felt horrible afterwards because they had to take him out in an ambulance and take him to the hospital. And he was fine after that. He was a little calmer than he had been the first few years, but so he was always a really memorable teacher. I had my science teacher in England, looked exactly like Doc Brown from Back to the Future.
Oh, that's cool.
Had the white lab coat on all the time, had the like crazy grayish white hair. He was a really fun guy too. Mr. Pym was his name. Had a writing teacher in college that was great. I ended up taking a couple of classes with him, and one of them was like a independent study where it was just me and him meeting once a month to kind of go over some work that I was doing for his class. And the one teacher, though, probably my favorite teacher, and my wife Sharon, this was one of her answers too, because he was just a great teacher. And I actually never had him as a teacher. I had him as both a football and wrestling coach. But Mr. Leone was one of the teachers at our high school. And he just, I don't know, he just was a really nice guy. Like, he's a really nice guy, really, helped out a lot of kids. And what are you going to say?
He's still there, but he is retiring soon.
Is he still there?
Yep.
I was curious to know what was going on with him. And so I tried to like Google him, and I tried to look stuff up at one point, and I couldn't find anything. So I didn't know if he was still there. But he's still at Libertyville?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Something tells me he will be pleased to know that you had trouble Googling him.
I think so. Yeah, he was always very quirky, and he was an interesting guy, but
still a quirky, interesting guy too.
That's kind of what I figured. I mean, that's not the kind of personality that really goes away over time. So
what did he teach?
He was teaching at the time. He was teaching earth science.
Okay.
I don't remember if he was teaching anything else. He might have been. I know he wasn't doing driver's ed. He was teaching earth science, and I know that he also was coaching the sophomore wrestling team, I believe it was, and he was also sophomore football coach. Might have been freshman football coach too. Either way, he was a coach. He was one of my coaches for two different sports.
I don't think he's coaching anymore.
Okay. Huh. I had no idea he was still there.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. Yeah, he was kind of he came across as kind of this sometimes gruff, kind of quirky, weird guy. But at the same time, he was probably the nicest teacher of any of the teachers that I had in high school. Just was really nice to, when we were in high school, Sharon's dad passed away. And just, he was really, really just nice to her about, I know you got to be in school and we'll get you through this time, just kind of, helping prioritize things. Like, yeah, school's important, but you also got some stuff you need to go through. So,
Cool.
And he was my wrestling coach when all that happened too, and he knew that the two of us were dating, and so he was really supportive, and just he's the kind of teacher that you hope that you would get, like somebody who is not just a teacher and wouldn't just be there to educate you, but also just be somebody who would give you sound advice on life and show you an example of how somebody should be. So even though he was never actually one of my classroom teachers, I probably would list him as one of my favorites. All right. Question number 2. Did you ever rebel or goof off in school?
No.
That's a boring answer.
It is, but I was very... One, I grew up Catholic, so, a lot of guilt involved.
Sure.
2...
Any yardsticks?
Not that I recall.
Okay. I'm picturing the scene from the beginning of Blues Brothers.
Both my parents are teachers.
Okay. Well, that would be why. Yeah.
And I just had, and I knew that they talked to my teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And especially now being a teacher, the understanding that teachers have with each other, where very little can be said, but very much can be understood. Mm-hmm. I was just always too scared to be the goof off.
You and I don't think had any classes together, so I don't know that I ever would have seen if you did.
We didn't.
Yeah.
And then, you kind of have to
that might be a good thing that I know there's no evidence against me.
Right. You have to define rebelling and goofing off. I mean, I was a good kid, probably to a fault. But at the same time, I did sort of quasi work for the school my junior and senior year, so I had access to keys to the building, so I didn't cut any class, but I also hung out on the roof when I wasn't supposed to, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But nothing like jumping out the window of my 8-hour Spanish class on the first day of spring or whenever that was.
So I don't know who you're talking about because I took French. So clearly you're talking about someone else.
Romance language is a romance language, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There it is.
Yeah, which actually I have a copy of it in my office at school. I was trying to Google real fast and see if I could find it. I was actually mentioned in an article in the Chicago Tribune because a teacher commented about, we had a student jump out the window one time.
I believe I've seen that article.
Have you seen that article? Yeah. I always said that someday
if you know where that article is, you should forward it to Coach Eggert.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you know this, but he is writing a book.
Oh, is he really?
A History of Libertyville High School.
He would be the person to write it.
And it is due to be out soon. The last time I spoke to him, he was working on some pictures with his editor and some things. So might be funny to work that in somehow. I haven't seen much of the book to know what the final product's going to look like. But.
Huh. Will it be one of those, how they have like at Barnes & Noble, they have those community books that all have like similar looking covers?
It's going to be bigger than that. This is going to be coffee table size.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Is his image.
Huh. Okay. Well, that's cool.
Originally, I was hoping it would be out for our 20th reunion, but I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Yeah, so that was mine, jumping out the window. All right. Well, Pat, what about you? Did you rebel in any way?
Not really.
Were you a troublemaker?
Not really. No, everything was kind of like, I was all good for me. So, I was just trying to muddle through life. I didn't need to go seeking trouble out and all that kind of stuff. There was one time at the Boy Scout camp we were at, we kind of all marched off. There was a Hostess Wonder Bread outlet factory, like right next to the camp. And we all took a hike, and $5 got you more than enough sweets and candies and Twinkies, and you could get like 20 Twinkies for a nickel or something, and that was like an unauthorized hike, and so we got in a little bit of trouble for that, but it wasn't like no one got hurt and or kicked out or any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, not really. I just kind of did my thing, and that was that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wish I had something saucy to tell you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. All right. Maybe if we ever create the podcast, 30 something after dark, if we have other stories that couldn't be told on the regular podcast, then.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. All right. Question number 3. Do you have a favorite poem or poet?
Yes. A lot of them.
Can you narrow it down to one?
I really like... one of my favorite poems is called Sunday Morning by Wallace Stevens. But I like Emily Dickinson because I Could Not Stop for Death. I think is such a great poem. The Raven, brilliant poem. That was too difficult of a question really for me. But Sunday Morning I came across when I took an American Lit course in college, and just really dug that poem, and just really the idea of appreciating the beauty around you. And one of the things that I got out of it was questioning whether or not it was necessary to attend a formal church service on a Sunday morning, or if you can find the same solitude and peace and understanding by taking time to pause and just look at the world around you. It was quite a debate in my American Lit class, but I really like it.
I'm gonna just jump right in there and say I don't. And much like art, it's something that I wish I read more. And I know I've got the power to do it, but this movie really makes me want to read more poetry and look up all these guys they were talking about and delve into it. So no, I don't have a favorite poet or poetry or any of that kind of thing. However, it's an area I hope that, if we ever get another movie about this, or when this movie comes up on its 40th anniversary, I can say I've started to read poetry and this is what I'm into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I do. It's more from when I was a kid, and I might be butchering the guy's name, but it's Jack Prelutsky, I think is his name.
Okay.
The one that everyone remembers that was his was the homework one that Apple was using most recently. I don't remember the whole poem even, but I have a couple of his books downstairs, and I remember really liking those when I was growing up.
I feel like I've used that poem.
A lot of people have. It's one that gets used a lot in schools and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And the other
homework
poem,
is it homework? Oh, homework.
Yeah.
Yes, I hate you. You stink. I wish I could wash you away in the sink.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The other one I really like, but it's in the movie, so I skipped past it, and as embarrassing as it is because I skipped past it, I didn't even look up who wrote it. And I think I even mentioned it in the movie, but I skipped. I just never went back to check. The one he references in the movie where the powerful play goes on, and you will contribute a verse. I've always loved that one, and I hadn't read it in years until, embarrassingly enough, Apple used it again.
Okay.
Recently, within the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, it's a Walt Whitman.
There we go.
Yeah.
I've always loved that poem, but it's one of those things that doesn't sit in my brain very well for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah, if you like that, that's from his Leaves of Grass collection of poetry.
Oh, that makes sense.
Probably more famous, yeah.
Yeah.
Or most famous, yeah. Yeah.
And you, sir?
Well,
I'm sure
again,
you have a few being an English language arts professor.
Well, yeah. I mean, having this been my major and my job for a while, and I'm sitting in my library right now with a whole bunch of different anthologies of poetry and all kinds of other stuff sitting around me right now. I was trying to think of how to narrow this down. And I did narrow it down to one poet and actually one particular poem that I really like. It was kind of tough, though, because there's a lot of Shakespeare's poetry that I really like. Love Edgar Allan Poe. You know, there's a lot of different other poets that I could have gone through and could have picked, and but I decided to go with John Donne. And probably my favorite poem ever is his poem "No Man is an Island." You guys heard that one?
No.
This one, I feel like sometimes this one gets pulled out. There's and actually there's a very famous phrase at the very end of the poem that gets, has been put into the vernacular and was used by Hemingway and all kinds of other people. It's actually a real short one, so I'll actually just read it to you. And John Donne, hopefully I'm getting this story right, because I'm just doing it off of memory, but he, I believe, was sick and was either, thought he was dying. And so he was laying in his bed and he could hear the church bells tolling outside. And he thought that maybe he had died and that he was like in his final moments of life, and the church bell was tolling to ring out his death. And so when he recovered, he wrote this poem about, how he was worried that he had died, and really they might have been funeral bells for someone else. But when he recovered, he was like, well, even though it wasn't me that was dying, it felt like I was dying. So therefore, when another person dies, that should make me feel like there's less of mankind in the world, or something like that. So his poem is "No Man is an Island." And I always keep coming back to this one. Whenever there's anything in, without getting political, whenever there's anything in the world where people are not looking out for each other, or people are pulling some of this every man for himself kind of junk, I always come back to this one a lot. So the text of the poem is: "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as any manner of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. And therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." So cool. that is one of my, it's real short. It's one of he's got a collection of poems that he calls meditations. It's just really short, but there are so many times where if I find that I am being particularly selfish about something, or people out in the world are being particularly selfish about things, or just there's just this sense of, an us against them mentality sometimes, then I always come back to this poem. I'm like, look, we're all part of the same. Like, no matter what group you come from, we ultimately, when you look at it, we're all part of the same. So whether this person looks different than you do, believes different from you do, it's all part of humanity. And yes, we can have our differences, but when something bad happens to one of us, we maybe should keep in mind that that is something bad happening to mankind, and remember it that way. So there's I'll get off my soapbox now, but that is my favorite poem.
Right on.
Cool.
He also has another really, really good poem called "The Flea." That's probably one of his more famous ones. But yeah, I would say he's probably one of my favorite poets out of all of them. All right. Question number 4. Question number 4 is, would you rather? So now we've had several movies in the last couple of years that have dealt with teachers inspiring their students through one form or another. So here's a question for you. Would you rather be taught by John Keating from Dead Poets Society, Jaime Escalante from Stand and Deliver, or Freddie Shoop from Summer School?
John Keating.
Okay. Why him? I agree, but why him?
There's no follow-up of why.
I know, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
I think he's the type of teacher that really would have I would have done well with, because he encouraged creativity and thinking outside the box and looking at things from a different point of view and considering ideas from different angles. I feel as though as a student, that's really where I did well, was being able to do that. So being in an environment that fostered that, I think that's exactly who I would want to have as a teacher.
Shoop.
Okay.
It's the sort of laid-back atmosphere I need in my life.
Okay.
I'd say Keating from this movie.
I'm also going to go Keating. Like, I think I think Shoop would be fun, but at the same time, I think that at a certain point, the laid back attitude might drive me a little nuts. Like if it's that laid back, if I knew that there was something I had to get done, I might be okay with the laid back for a while, but then I'd be like, okay, we really got to actually do this at some point. That, and I'm still weirded out by the fact that he had a student living with him.
Well, I didn't say it was right. I just said
No,
that's
I
the
know.
kind of guy I want to hang out with.
That's the teacher you want, yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Number 5. What is your earliest memory of performing something, whether it's on stage, a concert, a sporting event, whatever it might be?
Well, as you know, you've
done a lot on stage.
I've done my bit of theater.
Mm-hmm.
My earliest memory of performing probably be like a school concert, being in the chorus in school, and you know, whatever medley we were doing of I don't even know what.
Mm-hmm.
First stage show I ever did was Damn Yankees when I was in high school. So that's definitely a special memory for me.
Baseball.
Okay. How old were you?
Oh gosh. 6.
Okay. Did you win?
I don't know if we won the first game, but there was winning to be done.
Okay.
We didn't suck. I remember that.
Okay. There you go.
So that's something.
There you go. Pat, what about you? Do you remember your first?
Probably
time?
Band concert in 4th grade, or I'd say, our band director did recorders. He would, for the year before you started band, so in 3rd grade, you did recorders. Not part of general music, but he would teach just like a recorder ensemble. And I think I remember that that first time that I played.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. The first time that I performed something on stage, I was God.
All
and,
right.
and everything has been downhill since then.
I was gonna say, how do you beat that?
We were having a church play, and the play was the story of the Exodus, and so it was the story of Moses. So of course the children's play is called Let's Go with Mo. I'm sure it was a literary masterpiece, and all of the kids, these were I think these were like the 1st through maybe 5th grade kids. And so they were casting all the different parts, and I was totally convinced. I was like, I want to be the Pharaoh. Like, I think that would be the coolest part. You get to wear the costume. And see, even back then, I was into the costumes. I was like, I get to wear the costume. I get to be in charge. I get to be kind of like the bad guy. That's kind of cool. The only problem was, I think that maybe the person directing the play, their 5th grade or even 6th grade, much older child ended up being the Pharaoh. So already I wasn't too keen on that. However, come to find out that as a 3rd grader, I had a deeper voice than any other kid in the entire church. So they decided, well, we need someone to be the voice of God with the burning bush.
So you are Morgan Freeman.
So basically, I was Morgan Freeman. They stuck me behind a kind of like a lectern, and they actually hid me behind there because they only wanted to show they had created this kind of burning bush with a light inside of it. And whenever that would come on, I was hidden behind this. I was kind of like the Wizard of Oz, hidden behind the curtain. And my line was Moses. And so that was my first line. Well, the first time we practiced it, I had never actually spoken into a microphone before, so I got way too close to it. And the first time I did my Moses, it made all of the entire room shook. And all of the people running the play, they were like, yes, this is the voice of God that we need. And it's like, I'm sure my mom was off to the side being like, don't let it go. Any encouragement at all from anything you have to say.
Don't bury yourself in the part.
Right. So that's what I've always said. I was God in 3rd grade, and it's been downhill from there.
That's funny.
All right. Well, I think it's going to do it for our 5 questions and for Dead Poets Society. So if you've got anything else you want to add, if you want to tell us a little bit about what you like about this movie, if you want to answer any of our 5 questions, please feel free to give us a call on our voicemail line. It's 872-356-6843. or 87235-MOVIE if you want to do it that way. If you got the little numbers on your telephone buttons there. We're at 30podcast.com, at 30podcast on Twitter and most of the other social media outlets. If you want to find out more about the show, check us out on iTunes, any other place that you get your podcasts. We will be there. Our next episodes, we've done a whole bunch of recording of different things over the last few days. So I think, nobody quote me on this, but I think our next episode may actually be the recordings that Jeff and I did to talk about the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge park that's coming to Disney. So we took a couple of days to kind of digest all of the stuff that we had heard over the last few months, and then all the stuff that was announced at Star Wars Celebration this last weekend. So I believe that our next episode will be that one coming out, and then following that one will be our episode on Driving Miss Daisy. So that Driving Miss Daisy will be our next 80s movie. But our next episode may be our discussion of, Jeff had like 8 pages of notes that he had taken on the Galaxy's Edge Park. So we needed to get that recorded before he started writing a novel.
Good move.
Beyond that, in May, we've got coming up the movies we missed. So I've got most of our movies. I'm still waiting on Dennis to make a decision on which movie he wants to go with. For Pat, I've got Cannonball Run. And possibly, we if we got some time, we can also talk Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. For Bo, I've got The Dream Team. For me, I think I've narrowed it down to, and I had trouble with this one. I was like, do I do Star Wars? Because we didn't really talk the other Star Wars movies. I think I'm going to do American Werewolf in London.
Nice.
Because I like that one, and I feel like Star Wars would kind of be a given. So I will be inspired by John Keating, think outside the box, and say an American Werewolf in London. And then Jeff has chosen E.T. as his movie. So over the course of May, those will be the movies we're doing. We're going back to movies that we may have missed in the podcast as we were doing the other 80s movies, because after this year, we are in the 90s. That's not to say we can't go back sometime, but for the most part, we will be done with the 80s at the end of this year. So we're going back and hitting some that we did not get to cover the first time around. And then coming up very soon, at some point within the next couple weeks, I'm going to go see Avengers Endgame when it comes out. So I'm sure we will try to get some kind of a show in there to talk about that, because that is the wrapping up of the last 10 plus years of Marvel movies. And I did read an article today that said definitively this is the end of this stage of Marvel movies. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. It is over 3 hours long. I did also read somewhere today that somebody leaked some very revealing footage of the movie. So the directors and Marvel and Disney have come out and told people, please don't share it. Like we don't, or if you don't want to see it, like stay off the internet, because we don't want to give away any of the big secrets.
And this is of the new Star Wars movie?
This is for the new Avengers movie.
I'm sorry, I missed. It was kind of okay.
Yeah. And then coming up in June, if you want to get ahead on some of the movies we've got coming up in June, we've got Sex, Lies, and Videotape. We've got Drugstore Cowboy, Tango and Cash, and Roadhouse. And then at some point in June, we will hit our 250th episode. So 250 is, Jeff is running the 250th show. That'll be our show on the 80s cartoons. So hopefully you've done your voting, gentlemen, because Jeff said he's going to be strict on the rules here, and we're going to have to make some firm decisions. No more of this loosey-goosey. Well, I got to pick 5, so I'm going to give you 8 names, and I know I'm guilty of that too. So
I was going to say I was proud of you for narrowing your poets down today.
That was kind of tough, but I was specifically told by Jeff. I was like, nope. When we get to 250, decisions have to be made. All right, it's not going to be easy, but we'll do it. All right, that's going to do it for this one. So thank you both. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, John.
All right, you all be excellent to each other, and we will see you back here next time. Go watch some good movies. Be excellent to each other. We'll see you back here next time.